Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, I want you to picture this. A massive company, basically bankrupt, fighting wars on 3 different fronts and just about to be wiped off the map. That was the grim reality for the British East India Company back in the 1770s. But one man, with one incredibly audacious strategy, didn't just save them, he actually laid the foundation for an entire empire. Let's get into it. So to really appreciate just how amazing this turnaround was, you have to understand the sheer scale of the crisis. I mean, we're talking about a perfect storm of disasters that, by all rights, should have completely ended any British ambitions in India. It was that bad. For the British in India, the 1770s were just a total nightmare. They were surrounded by powerful enemies, their money and troops were stretched to the absolute breaking point, and their survival was a genuine question mark. This was, no joke, their darkest hour. I mean, look at this. It was a catastrophe on 3 fronts. In India, you had this huge alliance of Indian states, the Marathas, Mysore, Hyderabad, all teaming up to kick the British out. Then, halfway across the world, they were losing the war in the American colonies. And as if that wasn't enough, back home in Europe, their old rivals, the French, were always a threat. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and on the verge of being completely overwhelmed. But, in this moment of total desperation, the British had an ace up their sleeve. A man who knew India inside and out, a brilliant strategist who had a reputation for getting things done no matter what it took. His name was Warren Hastings, and he was about to completely change the game. So Hastings shows up in 1773 with this one single, incredibly daunting mission: save the East India Company from disappearing forever. He was in charge of bringing back British power and prestige, which, let's be honest, seemed like a totally impossible job. But Hastings was a realist. He knew the company couldn't just fight its way out of this mess. So he developed this radical new strategy, a plan that was, well, as brilliant as it was ruthless. It was called the ring fence policy. So what on earth is a ring fence policy? Well, in a nutshell, it was basically outsourced defense. Instead of fighting to protect their own borders, the British would offer to protect their neighbors' borders. And here's the genius part. They'd make the neighbors pay for the whole thing. It was a total win-win for the British, and a super clever way to get security without spending their own money. Here's the breakdown. Step 1. You find a nervous neighbor, like the Nawab, or ruler, of Awadh, who's terrified of being attacked. Step 2. You go to him and say, hey, don't worry, we share an enemy. We'll send our army to protect your borders. And then step 3, the master stroke, you send him the bill for the whole operation. The result? The British get a free buffer zone, a security blanket, paid for by their new, very grateful, and now slightly poorer ally. Okay, so that was the theory. But how did it actually play out? Well, this timeline right here shows us the key moments where Hastings' strategy was put to the test. And we're talking about a series of brutal, overlapping wars that would literally decide the future of the British in India. The very first test of this whole ring fence idea came in 1774, and it got messy fast. The Nawab of Awadh decided he wanted to conquer the neighboring kingdom of Rohilkhand, and he asked the British to help him out. Hastings, being the pragmatist he was, said sure, for a price. He basically rented out the British army for a very hefty fee. And, hey, strategically, it worked. The British got their money, their ally got his kingdom, and their own borders were safer. But morally, it was a disaster. Hastings was condemned for his actions. One critic even accused him of turning the British army into a band of mercenaries for hire. It was a decision that would cast a long, dark shadow over his entire career. But the Rohilla War, that was just the warm-up act. The real test of the ring fence policy was still to come. The British were about to get dragged into 2 epic wars at the same time against the 2 most powerful forces in southern India, the mighty Marathas and the fearsome kingdom of Mysore. Now, have a look at the outcome here. The first Anglo-Maratha War, indecisive. The second Anglo-Mysore War, same thing, indecisive. The key takeaway is that the British didn't actually win either of these wars. They were fought to a complete standstill, a draw. And here is the absolute crucial point. When you're a company that's on the verge of being totally wiped out, a draw is as good as a win. Just by surviving these wars, just by proving they couldn't be beaten, the British established themselves as a real power to be reckoned with. They had gone from being the hunted to one of the hunters. But Hastings wasn't just about military strategy. The man was a seriously cunning diplomat. He negotiated a peace treaty that gave the company 20 years of peace with the Marathas, some much-needed breathing room. And then, with a well-placed bribe, he completely shattered the anti-British alliance by convincing the powerful Nizam of Hyderabad to just walk away from his allies. It was a masterclass in divide and rule. So Hastings had done the impossible. He saved the East India Company from total collapse. But his reward wasn't some hero's welcome. Nope, it was a one-way ticket to the courtroom. The very methods he'd used to ensure survival were about to be put on trial in one of the biggest scandals of the century. And the man leading the charge against him was this fiery politician, Edmund Burke. Burke accused Hastings of a whole list of crimes: corruption, extortion, abuse of power, you name it. He was absolutely determined to make an example out of Hastings for his actions in India. The result was an absolute political firestorm. Hastings was impeached by Parliament, and his trial became the biggest story in the country. For 7 long years, the entire nation was just captivated by this drama, as the man who saved British India fought to save himself. Finally, in 1795, after 7 years of legal battles and public humiliation, the big moment arrived. The verdict was in. Warren Hastings was found not guilty. He was cleared of all charges and was a free man. So that leaves us with the big question. Was Warren Hastings a hero or a villain? A savior who rescued the British from the brink of disaster, or a scoundrel who set a pretty dark precedent for the future? His acquittal didn't really settle the debate. He saved the company, there's no arguing that. But the way he did it forces us to ask a really tough question. Does the end always justify the means? The answer, just like the man himself, is complicated.